Greetings, audiophiles and Legend of Korra fans. Oh, who am I kidding? Welcome, Bolin fans, to my reading of my fanfiction, Castle of Glass. Legend of Korra and the characters therein belong to their respective owners and creators. The original characters and the premise of this story belong to me. Enjoy! Part 5. Oncoming Storm. The cart trundled along, pulled by 2 seal oxen. Kida sat at the back, shoulder to shoulder with her father, grimly attempting to ignore the jostling. She also tried her best to keep a good fume going at her father's behavior with the letter from Bolin. She was in her own world again when the cart pulled to a stop at the outpost camp. Without the shelter of the city, a cruel wind whipped through, grabbing at Kida's hair and taking her warmth with it. She held herself and scanned the camp. Low, rounded buildings made up of branches and animal hides stood out against the snowy backdrop of the mountains. She saw people wearing traditional Southern Watertribe garb. Kida couldn't shake the feeling that fleeing to an outpost was letting the North win. They had abandoned their homes and businesses, for what? Like a stubborn child that couldn't have his way and runs off. Like her. She hastily banished those thoughts and focused on helping her father carry their belongings into a long cabin where several families were living. Bunk beds were set up inside, barracks style, with large lockers at the ends for people to put their things in. Warm furs covered each bunk. A fire pit squatted in the middle of the long hut, with a hole in the ceiling to let the smoke escape. It was noisy. Children rushed everywhere, bumping and playing. Women chattered. Kida felt instantly out of place. She hurried through the task of helping her father unpack. Then she pulled her coat back on and tugged her hood up. "I'm going to explore," she said. "Kida, I really don't think you—" her father began, but she strode away, ignoring his words. She had to hold her hood as the wind grabbed at it. She squinted, her eyes watering with the cold. The snow was thick and heavy around the buildings. She saw some people moving about, but not many. She decided to begin walking and see where her feet took her. Another residential longhouse or two, a smaller hut which she guessed belonged to the chief and his wife. Father and mother of the Avatar, Kida recalled. She wondered if they were proud of their daughter. What did they think of Avatar Korra abandoning them? Kida had always liked Chief Tonrock. He was steady and usually very kind to his people. He didn't put on airs and act all high and mighty like his brother did. Still, she wasn't sure how he could stand for this, or how he could flee with his people instead of staying to fight. She walked on. Supply houses, a buyer for livestock. Then she spied the building where she knew she would spend most of her time, away from her father and the noisy, crowded longhouse. The healing hut. She strode over and confidently pushed aside the thick hide door. As soon as she entered, she found herself taken firmly by the upper arms and ushered to a cot before she could utter a word. A young woman, perhaps a little older than Kida herself, bustled around her. "Are you sick? What are your symptoms? Please be specific." "I'm not sick," Kida managed as the girl grasped her jaw and began probing the lymph nodes on either side of Kida's throat. "Injured, then?" the young woman asked, already turning to a bowl of healing water which sat beside the cot. "No," Kida said, exasperated. "Oh," the girl seemed flummoxed. "Well then, you shouldn't be here." "Yes, I should." Kida stood up, putting her hands on her hips and tossing her head so her hood flew back. She glanced around, expecting to see her teacher somewhere in the hut. She saw many healing women, old and young, but her teacher was nowhere to be seen. She must have gone to a different outpost, Kida thought glumly. "Who is this, Lily?" Kida turned to see the speaker and her eyes got very wide. "Master Katara?" she exclaimed. She bowed deeply from the waist, wondering if she should get on her knees for a full bow. The short old woman who walked up to meet them was a legend. The wife of Avatar Aang, plus an amazing healer, and a warrior in a culture which still stubbornly discouraged women from fighting. Kita was completely starstruck. She opened her mouth, attempting to explain herself, but no sound came out. Her cheeks went red because she was certain that she looked like a fish that had just been landed. Master Katara, for her part, smiled kindly at the young woman. "What seems to be the trouble?" she asked. "I was trying to examine this young woman," the girl called Lily explained haughtily. She looked down her nose at Kita. "But then I found out she was not sick or injured. So I told her she needed to leave. This hut is for the sick or injured only, not gawkers." This finally made Kita annoyed enough to find her words. "I'm not a gawker, I'm a healer. I've been trained all my life by Master Mira." "I know Mira." Master Katara nodded, her smile causing her eyes to wrinkle pleasantly at the corners. Kita felt instantly drawn to the woman she so admired. Her heart beat fast as she smiled back. "She has a few apprentices that I know of. Which are you?" "Kita," Kita said proudly. Katara seemed to be considering for a moment. "I believe I've heard her speak of you." Not the glowing recognition Kita had been hoping for, but at least she wasn't going to be ousted from the hut. "Mira trains several techniques that other healers do not, such as blood healing. I've been trying to get the other masters to teach it as well, but you know how stubborn people can be sometimes." "Are you trained in blood healing, young Kita?" "I am," Kita said, her proud tone returning to her voice. She hadn't guessed that her training was special. She and her teacher's other students all knew it. It seemed the most natural way to heal. Katara nodded. She leaned towards Kita, her voice low and confiding. "To be honest, not all waterbenders can learn the technique. Like true bloodbending, it's a rare gift. We in the South are more likely to have the gift." The girl, Lily, was still standing by, looking uncomfortable. Kita wondered if Lily knew how to use blood healing. "I was hoping I could make myself useful here in the healing hut," Kita said, clasping her hands behind her back, trying to look like an eager apprentice. Already she was daydreaming of Master Katara being impressed with her skills, saying that she wanted to take Kita as her own apprentice. The door opened again and a gust of icy wind rushed in. A woman stood, supporting a man against her shoulder. "Please help! We just got in from the city. We were attacked by northern soldiers. My husband—" Kita rushed forward with Lily to help the man to a cot. Several other healers looked up from what they were doing to see if they were needed. When they spotted Katara, they turned back to their own tasks. "Well, Kita, it seems that you have a chance to prove yourself," the master healer said, smiling. Kita rolled up her sleeves. The man's leg had the most obvious damage. A long, ugly wound ran up his calf. His wife had done her best to bandage it with rags, but blood still seeped through. Kita gently spread her fingers over the wound. She closed her eyes, and her mind slipped easily into its healing state. The leg wound was an easy mend. She reached out with her right hand, not even opening her eyes, and summoned the healing water from the bowl beside her. One hand swirling in lazy circles, she worked the water. With the other hand, she encouraged his body to heal. His blood and flesh obeyed, and soon the injury was shrinking. Then it sealed, looking like nothing more than a surface scratch. Kita was about to pull her hands away when she hesitated for a moment. Her old teacher's words rang in her ears. "Don't be too eager. Remember to check for infection with every wound." Kita reached out with her senses, feeling the man's blood pulsing and surging through his veins. She searched carefully for infection. Satisfied that there was none, she lifted her hands from his skin and opened her eyes. The man was smiling gratefully at her, and his wife gave a cheer, throwing her arms about his neck. "Be careful," Kita warned. "I healed the wound, but I couldn't replace the blood he lost. He should rest and drink plenty of fluids for a while." "Yes, of course," the wife said, still beaming. Kita turned to Katara and Lily. "Well done," the master smiled. Kita felt her heart glow. Certainly it had been an easy healing, but she had still been praised by Master Katara herself. How many people had that distinction? "Thank you, Master." Kita bowed again. "You are welcome to help us, young Kita. Lily will show you around and teach you our methods." Kita shot an annoyed glance at the older girl, but then she turned back to Katara with a willing smile. "Thank you, Master, and may I say I hope I have the chance to study your techniques as much as possible." "We shall see," was all the healing master said as she walked away. "Let me show you around," Lily said, her tone flat and annoyed sounding. Kita followed Lily through the hut. Healers were working quietly. There was the familiar smell of dried herbs and wood smoke in the air. Lily spoke sparingly. She was clearly not eager for Kita to become the new favorite. Kita wasn't sure that would happen, but she had her hopes. She might not have been good at pro-bending, but she was a skilled healer. She knew that much. A lifetime of training had to come for something. "Here we do triage," Lily gestured, sounding bored. "You know what that is, right? You know how to assess which injuries are the worst and which should be treated first, I assume." Of course," Kita answered. Her teacher had explained triage, but she had never actually had to do it herself. They had never had that many wounded at one time. Lily shot Kita a look, which Kita wasn't certain she understood. Was it superiority or pity? Kita swallowed, reassuring herself that she would succeed here. This was her chance to do something more than make sculptures at her father's shop. If she distinguished herself enough, maybe she could give up the family business and become apprentice to Master Katara. Her father would have to let her do that, surely. It would be the opportunity of a lifetime. Kita did her best for the next several days. She worked in the healing hut as much as she could, not only because she wanted to impress Master Katara, but also because she wanted to be around her father as little as possible. He only made her more frustrated every time they talked, especially if she brought up Bolin. For a while, the handsome earthbender was far from her thoughts, but then someone got their hands on a radio and tuned it to the Republic City station. Kita listened as often as she could. Once she was even admonished by one of the other women for being too unfocused on her tasks. Embarrassed, she tried not to listen unless all she was doing was sweeping or tidying. She still heard quite a bit of information. It seemed that while dangers were broiling in the water tribes, the city was having issues as well. Bombings baffled the police. The president flatly refused to come to the aid of the Southern tribe. Kita usually ended up fuming after she heard such reports. Those spoiled Republic City people, they couldn't even be bothered when people in the South were in serious danger, when people in the South had been chased from their homes. Then she heard something else. "Newest craze to hit Republic City. Movers are a new breakthrough in entertainment. Inventor and wealthy entrepreneur Varric claims that soon everyone will be flocking to see his movers. Thus far, the most popular series of movers has been The Adventures of Nuktuk, Warrior of the South. The popular character of Nuktuk is portrayed by the one-time champion pro-bender, Bolin." Kita stopped sweeping, uncertain if she had heard correctly. "Bolin?" she whispered. "Her Bolin?" When the earthbender was asked what it was like to play a waterbender on the big screen, he replied, "I have had a chance to train with a really great waterbending teacher who showed me how to move convincingly. I think the audience will totally believe I'm a natural." Kita almost dropped her broom. It was her Bolin. Was he talking about her? Was she the waterbender he had trained with? Her heart did a little flip in her chest. So, he was a big star now. No wonder he hadn't been in a hurry to come back. She wondered if she should be mad or upset, but to be honest, she understood. If she could get away and become a mover star, she certainly would. Even if she did have to leave behind a boy she had just met. After all, she thought, they'd only kissed once, and that had been her idea anyway. Her hand strayed to her pocket, wrapping around the little sandstone fragment she kept there. "Kita, over here!" Master Katara called her suddenly. Kita's head shot up, snapping around to look towards the door. Several men were being led inside, more injured than Kita had ever seen come at once. She recognized many of them as village warriors. Her breath caught. They certainly looked as though they'd been in a fight. Bleeding wounds, bruises, frostbite from the frigid water many cold weather benders used. One of the older women did triage and gave the younger healers their tasks. Kita found herself working on a young man she thought she recognized from her jaunts through town. What was his name? Norak? She tried as she coaxed his broken rib back into place. He grimaced and blinked a few times, looking up at her. He must have recognized her because he nodded slightly. His face was pale and his eyes watered with pain. Kita closed her eyes again, helping his body to knit itself back together. Once the rib was back where it belonged, and no longer in danger of puncturing something vital, she opened her eyes again. He was looking at her. She was glad he hadn't passed out. "What's going on?" she hissed, careful to keep her voice low. "We're fighting back," he answered, his voice tight. Kita moved to hold his hand flat between her own, sensing a broken bone there. "Fighting back?" she asked. "Yeah. We're not going to stand for being chased out of our homes. We backed out of the city to regroup so we could make guerrilla attacks. We can't win a head-on fight, but Chief Tonrock thinks we can succeed this way." "It doesn't seem like we can win this way either," Kita pointed out, setting his mended hand back down at his side and working on a few angry bruises where ice bending had struck him. "We were just a distraction." Norak smiled impishly at her. "There were 2 groups that went out. The other got in and stole supplies right from under the enemy's noses. None of those warriors were injured because we kept the Northerners busy." "This still seems like a really bad plan," Kita said, sitting back on her heels. "You're healed. You might be stiff for a few days, especially around that rib, but you'll be fine." "Thanks, Kita." The young man smiled crookedly. He started to walk away, but she caught his hand. "Wait. Be careful out there. I don't want to see you in here again, all right?" He chuckled. "No promises." His words were happy and sly, like a kid who had just gotten his knee bandaged after playing a prank, not like a young man whose rib had almost punctured a lung. She shook her head, her hands cupping her elbows, watching him go. One thing she knew with certainty: things were going to get worse before they got better.